What's up, everyone? Welcome to Level 7. It is time for another episode of the Agents of Fandom podcast. I'm your host, TJ Zwarich, taking you towards the end of our Percy Jackson and the Olympians journey, joined as always by my good buddy and co-host, writer, and editor extraordinaire, Adam Blevins. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. But no, I just actually finished rewatching the episode, and somehow I think I loved it even more the second time, which was pretty hard to fathom for me because I absolutely adored it the first watch. So I didn't really think it could get any better. But somehow I think I found a way to enjoy it more. So I'm super excited to spend the next hour talking about it with you guys.
I couldn't agree more because I actually, when I was watching it the second time today, I realized that there was just so much that happened in this final episode. Whereas when I was watching for the first time, I kept kind of thinking like, is that it? Is that it? Is that it? And then they'd show me something else. And then they'd show me something else. And I kind of kept forgetting like what the main plot was going to end with when it's like, we see Zeus. Is this the final showdown? It opens with Ares. And I'm like, is this the final showdown? Because it's all so climactic. We've had a great last couple weeks of Percy Jackson shows. Of course, we had fellow agent Emma joining us with Erica Ito of the Seaweed Brain podcast. The very next week, we had Brandon Moore come on with us, and he was joined by Liam Crowley. And he's, of course, from ComicBook.com, host of Riptide Radio. And now, today, we thought, why not with the finale, level it up? Keep it going with comicbook.com. And we got the other co-host from Riptide Radio, friend of the show, multiple times guest here, Nicole Drum. How you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm so happy to be back. I love you guys so much. So it's so awesome to be back and to be talking about Percy Jackson. Oh my gosh. Especially the last episode of what I hope is just the beginning of an epic adventure, because we better be getting that season 2 announcement. Like, come on.
Obviously, Percy Jackson and Marvel are very in different spaces, but it's all still under the Disney roof. I'm kind of surprised at the end of this episode we didn't get a Percy Jackson will return in season 2. I kind of thought maybe they would pull the same thing that they do in the Marvel stuff. Before we get going here, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the Agents of Fandom wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on socials at Agents Fandom on Twitter and TikTok, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. And you brought it up, Nicole. Like, it's especially exciting because it's Percy Jackson. What's your relationship to Percy Jackson? When did you get into these books? I didn't even realize before the show started until I started tuning into Riptide Radio how big of a PJO fan you were.
I know. I've been kind of flying under the radar. I'm old. We all know this. I'm like everybody's auntie because I'm old. For me, my Percy Jackson journey actually started when I was a bookseller. I worked for Borders Books 1,000 years ago, and the first book had already been out, but it was the subsequent books for me. I was a young adult children's lit specialist, and so I remember doing midnight release parties, and we would get those books in as like ARCs, or we would get them early, and so they were a big deal. And because I am helping guide children to literature, of course I'm going to read these books as they're coming in. And from page 1, book 1, I am like sneaking off into the corner while shelving things, reading these books. And so for me, it was an organic journey of just starting with well, what are the kids actually reading? What are my little customers coming in and asking for? So if they want an epic adventure, I can give them something. And that's where it started for me. And it just became a full-on thing. And the more I would read them, the more I enjoyed them. But also watching young people, and I say young people like I was super old. I wasn't super old at the time. I was relatively young myself. But like watching people really get into it made me love them even more. And then now that I am a parent, I'm watching my child do the same thing. So my story starts as someone helping people discover them while discovering them myself. So it's been basically a thing probably for me since like 2006, 2007. So I've been there from almost the ground floor.
Back-to-back weeks with an awesome Borders bookstore reference, with Brandon bringing that up last week, where he discovered Percy Jackson at a Borders bookstore at a Harry Potter midnight release launch.
Did some of those too.
and then he discovered Percy Jackson at that time and became a fan ever since. I've been talking about how it blew me away when I was at New York Comic Con how passionate and big the Percy Jackson fan base is. And it kind of compared, like what I was comparing it to, it felt a lot like Harry Potter before the movies. You know, obviously the movies kind of explode Harry Potter to another level. But as someone who was working at the bookstore during these times, would that kind of compare to you? To, like, obviously Harry Potter with the movies brings it a different level of popularity, but where's Percy Jackson in comparison as they're coming up?
Percy Jackson's the same level, just it's same level, different audience to a certain extent. Like, I feel like Percy Jackson brings in a group of kids who are maybe more interested in magic. And I'm not saying that the two groups aren't shaking hands, because they absolutely are. They're both epic adventures. But there are a certain group of kids who are looking for the idea of magic and creating things. And then there's the group of kids who are looking for the unseen world and mystical creatures, and just watching people like those group of kids learning like this whole world of history and myth and belief and things that actually really do, whether or not the gods are real, they really do influence our culture today. It's the same, it was the same level of hype. It was the same level of energy, and watching people's faces and the absolute devotion to these characters, and watching little like 10-year-olds get very heated over it's still the cute, like watching my son have opinions as he's reading his way through these books is hilarious. Cause like my partner Deshaun's got his thoughts on stuff. He's like, no, that's not how it is. Like, this is how it's got to be. And I think this character is this. And it's like, it's the same as when I saw the Harry Potter fans. Like, people would come to the parties, like wearing blue, just like people would come with like the lightning on their head. And it's the same level of energy. And I'm really excited to see Percy Jackson finally getting that, especially like basically a generation later, because the people that I was selling the books to have littles of their own. And we're getting to experience that with them. And I think it's just amazing that these books are timeless. The stories are timeless. The fandom is timeless. And it's amazing. And it's all encompassing. And I'm so glad we got this series. And it's so well done. Like, our moment is here. And I'm so happy for it.
It really is. The Greek mythology aspect is really what drew me to it. Got my Camp Half-Blood shirt on right now. So we got it at New York Comic Con. So another reason for those watching us on YouTube, smash the like button. Adam, season finale. We've been on this ride for a while now. What did you think of the episode? You brought up you watched it 2 times now. What did you think as a fan? What did you think as a critic?
Well, so Liam talked about last week the first time watching it as a fan and then having that rewatch experience where it's like strictly as a critic. And I kind of I was like, you know what? Liam's a really smart guy. Let me try this out this time. So that was kind of what I aimed to do, which is why I rewatched it again today. And I think it's probably just because of a lack of experience, but I had a little bit of a tougher time doing that. And maybe it was because I just enjoy this episode so much. And like, I don't want to say when I turn the critic brain on that I'm looking for things to critique, but I guess I'm just a little more open to it. Because when I was first watching it a couple nights ago, it was just so emotional and I was really caught up in everything and enjoying everything. And it's like, and I watched it today and I was like, okay, let me take a deep breath. I know what's coming. Let me like do some rewinds if I need to, make sure I'm paying real close attention to the dialogue, to the things going on in the background. And I'll say the only thing that I noticed that was a little bit different that I didn't really pick up on Tuesday night is that it moves really quickly, but not to a point where it's bad. It does, like, I think this would have worked with another 10 or 15 minutes with a few minutes extra in each scene, but I don't think that would like that it's suffering because it doesn't have that. It moves quick, but they do a really good job with each scene feeling important. And that was the biggest thing, really the really difference that I said the biggest really difference. My spontaneous dyslexia, Percy Jackson will be proud of me. It just kicked in right there. The biggest difference really that I noticed was just like the pacing. But I thought like even though it was quick, it worked really, really well. But it's like they don't waste any time on like any of these storylines. And there's no little, like even the little scenes that we get, like the touching moments between characters like Percy, Annabeth, and Grover, like under the tree, feels like a really important scene, like in setting up for like this is like the time where they get to kind of embrace and celebrate what they've accomplished together. But even then, it's like Annabeth is going to see her father, and like she was just talking to Athena about it, and then Grover's going on this like finally going on his quest. It's like, yeah, this was kind of their time to chat and wrap things up, but it was also like really, really important information and setting, like recapping, but also setting up things to come. So I don't know. I mean, it's really tough to not only kind of stick the landing narratively, like I think they did so well, but to also have it feel, as well paced and everything as they did. But this was just like nearly a perfect episode for me. I mean, the few nitpicks that I have are some of the same ones that I've mentioned in past episodes that I'm not gonna keep rehashing because it's just unnecessary. But like overall, this is like a 9.7, 9.8 episode of TV to me. I thought it was great.
Couldn't agree more. I think I actually think there's enough in these books that this for like the Lightning Thief could have been either 8 60-minute episodes of television or 13 45-minute episodes of television, something like that. But having said it, I agree. This finale was probably my favorite episode. You get a little bit of everything. You get some Camp Half-Blood, you get some Ares, you get some Zeus, which we'll talk more about, and of course, great moments with Poseidon, great moments with Sally. Nicole, what did you think of the finale?
I think the finale was fantastic. And one of the things I thought throughout the whole season, and even going into the season, I felt a little bit like they had almost an impossible task. They're taking, because the adage is all writing is rewriting. And in a very real way, they're taking a book and they're rewriting it. This is just another revision for Rick Riordan. And they are taking a book that in a very real way has to be full of detail, compressing it into a shorter space, and at the same time giving you the complete story without missing the detail. And I think what they did beautifully, particularly in this episode, is they show, but they don't have to tell. And I think that's where the strength of the shorter season with the shorter episodes really worked. Are there places would I have liked in the finale to see a little bit? I would have liked a little longer of an Ares fight, because let's just be honest, watching Edge just play Ares is like the coolest thing in the world. Like, it is so bad. Like, I was gonna say like the bad word, but it's just, that's so kick butt. I wanted more of that.
Allowed on the podcast.
He was so badass. I wanted more of it. Like, I would have taken more. I understand like the need to be brief with some of that. And also I think we also kind of forget to a certain extent that these stories are geared towards a slightly younger audience because of the range of appreciation for these stories. And kids have an attention span. And I saw that firsthand with the finale, watching my child watch it. And he begged to stay up past his bedtime to watch it. And he was just like, I'm done. Like, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense why maybe it's a little shorter, but I have no complaints. I honestly feel like this, because it told the complete story, the season itself told the complete story, but still left us with a lot. For me, this is going to be right up there as one of my absolute favorite season finales across the board of anything I've ever watched. I got everything I wanted out of this, plus some things I didn't expect, and I got to cry, and it was great.
Very well said. And I think the going into the fight with Ares, the attention span thing isn't something I really considered, but looking at it as much as, we love the show, we're actually not the main target audience. The main target audience is to inspire this younger generation, bring in the fans who are reading the books for the first time, who are young, who will be lifelong fans. And so that really does make a lot of sense. The one thing I could have used, probably if I was expanding one scene, it probably would have been the fight with Ares for me too, because like one of my favorite, I don't know if tropes is the right word for this, but sort of the things in media is like the Super Saiyan moment of like, give me Goku getting angry, then he transforms and it's this big moment. And like, you get just like the smallest piece of that with a big wave flying, flashing over to Ares. But I could have had like that to be a little bit longer. Like, you get a clear, like, oh, he just pushed him into water. He pushed him into water. That was a bad idea, Ares. But then give me a little bit more of Percy, like,
yep,
and just like full on Super Saiyan it at him. That's what I really would have loved. But it still was a cool fight. And the other cool fight this episode began with was the Percy versus Luke, and that's something I really enjoyed right off the bat, because the way this season starts is a monologue from Percy, and it's very much his perspective, just like the books are. And that's, to me, the biggest difference between I haven't read all the books, but from like book one and this is, it's not just Percy's perspective; it's the whole story's perspective, and that does allow you to change things up. And when this one starts, it's from Luke's perspective, And this is something that you and Liam talked about on Riptide Radio, is there's parts of this episode where Percy's very much like a supporting character. And that's the end fight with Luke and kind of the starting fight with Luke as well when he's narrating it. As we get more of that perspective throughout the episode, and we won't talk about so much, obviously spoilers, but we won't talk about the Luke turn yet. But it did actually make me look a lot differently at those conversations, specifically at the beginning of the episode between Percy and Luke, knowing that this iteration of Luke, because it's not just pure Percy's perspective, it's the entire story, is very, also like you guys brought up on Riptide Radio, more anti-hero than villain.
Yep.
He has a specific perspective, a relatable perspective. His goal isn't necessarily not noble, but his means of going to Kronos, etc., are. And so I really enjoyed getting to see that added perspective, and then looking at it as though he's trying to recruit him. He's not trying to kill him. And when you look at it through that lens, those conversations feel very, very different. What stood out to the most for you, Adam, at the beginning, whether it be Percy and Luke, Percy and Ares, anything you would have liked to see more of, or was it just like, that was fantastic the way it bounced back and forth?
Well, no, I mean, it was definitely fantastic. No notes on that. But I think the interesting thing was, for people that were going into this show completely blind, that haven't read the books and had no idea what they were getting themselves into, so much of the marketing and the trailers and everything kind of lead it up to be like the Edge thing, like the Edge conflict is the big fight, like this fight on the beach, because almost every single trailer ends with that shot of Edge carrying the sword, or Adam Copeland, carrying the sword on his back with the beach. So then it's like, I know everybody that has no familiarity. Excuse me, my dog is. Sorry, for those, I know those people that are watching live are always probably just like, why is he always turning around and looking? But I have just a crazy dog that's always just causing chaos. But anyway, I think I'm sorry about that. What was so interesting about that was just that, like, I think there was a lot of misdirection there with every one of the trailers kind of leading to be like, that's the conflict. So I would have loved to have been in the shoes of somebody that sees this for the first time and is like, wait, like as soon as we leave Luke and Percy for the first time, we go to the beach and it's like, wait a minute. There's still like 35 minutes in this. Like, what are we going to do after that? And even though like I knew a lot of what was coming, I was still really, really surprised that we were knocking this out of the way like so early. And yeah, like it would have been really cool to see more. And that fight does end really, really quickly. I thought it was really well choreographed. One thing that I noticed, but whether it was like Luke and Percy or Ares and Percy, all the fights were really well choreographed. And that was something that I tried to watch for on especially on my second watch. I tried to look for a little more like, wait a minute, does it move a little slow or something? And it's like, no, like this looks great. They clearly worked really, really hard on this and they did a great job with it. So, I mean, yeah, it kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, although, yeah, it would have been nicer to have, or it would have been nice to see 5 extra minutes added onto that scene. Maybe they chat a little bit more. Maybe the fight's a little bit longer. I think it worked perfectly with, the balance they struck in the end, I think worked really well.
Yeah, at the moment it seemed a little fast. You look at it through the pace of the episode, it makes a ton of sense. And they really did such a good job of not only the misdirect, but making each of those scenes feel like it was the most important climactic one, whether it be with Ares, with Zeus, back at Camp Half-Blood, with Luke later on. Each time felt like it could have been the big concluding moment. What were your thoughts on the opening fights, Nicole?
I thought the opening fights were interesting. I thought what I particularly appreciated is that even going into it as somebody who knew the dynamic of what was going to happen with Percy and Luke, even in that, and not being aware of how we were going to get Luke's perspective, like that honestly really surprised me, that we were going to kind of have a better understanding of him and therefore see him less as a villain and more as an antagonist. You really got the sense that this was genuine training, and you learned something about both of those characters that became crucial to understanding everything you'd seen before. Like, we understand Percy's approach to things. We understand him better than we've ever known him before in terms of how he approaches things. And it made this fight with Ares make so much more sense, in how Percy was never going to be out to actually do harm. He's more trying to prove a point. And I thought that juxtaposing those things together in terms of where they were in sequence actually makes the Ares fight more epic somehow. Is because you see the journey, especially when you realize that what we're learning is the rules of it, how to win a fight is not actually by brawn, it's about brain, it's about playing the game, it's like setting the rules. And I thought that was very, very interesting. It's another instance of where the show is laying out its groundwork without actually having to like get a whiteboard and pull over like a lot of shows do and like hammer the point home. And I thought that was really, really smart. And I think maybe that's why we didn't get a longer fight, because they were doing some beautiful work showing us without telling us. And I thought that was really cool.
And that really is who Percy's character is I'm not here to do harm. I'm not here to for the glory. But I'm here. I'm gonna prove a point, and as long as the point gets made, I don't necessarily care what happens to me. And you can see his confidence and that aspect of his character really just expand this episode. Really just come to. It's been foreshadowed so well, and not necessarily foreshadowed, but you can see the character growth so well throughout the season, and then it really comes to a beautiful, beautiful conclusion. And you see it when Percy returns that helm. Like Adam, when like that scene was, I thought, so interesting because I wouldn't have played. That's where I felt like the least relatable to Percy, because I was like, damn boy, look at this charisma. Because I would have been like, all right, take me back to Hades. I need to. You can touch this when I get to see my mom. Like, and he's just like, I did it, motherfucker. Bam. Take your helm. I'll see you later. My mom will be back. What like that was one of the that was kind of like the most surprising scene for me, because I didn't just feel like look at Percy. That's me, where you do a lot of the time, because I was like, oh, he outgrew me already.
Yeah. Well, this is where I think Walker Scobell really shined so much, especially as we moved along in this season, is like portraying these elevated levels of like confidence and comfortability in these kinds of situations. Because you think about like in every kind of interaction he's in this episode, he seems really comfortable. Like he may not know exactly what's going to happen, but he's like willing to accept that he's going to go into this and he's going to do his best. And like, hey, like I know what I'm doing. Like I may not know what's going to happen, but I know what I'm doing. And you think about like where he was at earlier, even like talking to Chiron, and the first time he talks to Luke, he's just like clueless and he's doubting himself so much. And like it's really easy for that to kind of get lost, because he's done such a great job like seamlessly transitioning that into his performance. But it's like I really noticed that when I was like, especially today when I was rewatching, and I was like, this kid knows exactly what he's doing all the time now. This is not the same like scared little kid we saw in the first couple of episodes, which I don't know. I was criticizing the performances a little bit, like for the children. I think for episodes 4 or 5, around in that range, and even then, that was only because the adults were all so good that it was a little bit of a stark contrast, like having to go from every single god and person that was so great to then to the kids, where I think they had a little bit of a tougher time earlier and through the midway part of the season carrying the show on their own. But like by the time we get to the end, they're just all of them are so comfortable in these roles, but especially Walker Scobell, which is like, obviously he's the face of it all. It's like you got to have Percy to get it right, and he absolutely nailed it. It's just like, man, he did such a great job, and there's also so much more room to grow with the character. Like Percy has so far to go, to go, and because I've only read I think the first 3 books, and I reread the first one about a few weeks before the series, so that's where my knowledge. It's been a few years since I read the second and the third one, so I'm like hesitant myself to even go back and reread them, because I know I almost want to like experience these surprises that I know are in store. But at the same time, I also want that background knowledge. But man, Walker, I just had to sing Walker Scobell's praises for a few minutes there, because he's done such a great job as the season has gone along. He really grew into the role like over the course of the season.
He is Percy Jackson. And one of the things I love about the inevitable season 2 and beyond we're going to get going forward is, since I love my big power up moment with the hero, one of the ones I hate is like, for example, the first Thor movie, where he doesn't have his powers for the whole movie. Well, if I just wanted to watch a dude run around without knowing what he is, I could watch any movie. It wouldn't be Thor. It's one of the reasons why I like the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire actually better than Spider-Man 2, as great as it is, because I don't love the whole losing power trope. I like the power up trope for my hero. And so kind of that Percy ends this season and progresses through this episode, but ends the season just like confident and ready to be the hero. Annabeth says at the end, you know, you're not just some, I told you, you're not just some kid. That to me, the fact that we're already there is so exciting going forward. That's kind of like the Harry Potter doesn't get that confidence till Goblet of Fire, when he actually finally does something for the first time, where it's not just other people saving his butt or him lucking into it. He actually does something, so he gets it. It's when Katniss Everdeen shoots the apple off of the people's heads in the training thing. It's when Carol Danvers says, "I've been fighting with one hand tied behind my back. What happens when I break free?" And she gets her big Super Saiyan moment. Even though we didn't like, Percy mentally is there now, and I think that brings up in a super exciting thoughts about where that character can go going forward. Nicole, what do you think?
I think what's interesting, and what I think is really interesting, is that when we get that moment, especially for someone, a character that is young like this, and we get it early in their journey, it opens the door for the, I have my confidence, I have that Super Saiyan confidence, I've settled into that power, and now you have the opportunity to make mistakes with it, which when you know the story, you know that happens, especially with Greek gods and Greek mythology. Hubris is a thing, and it's going to happen. And I love stories like that, because every good hero has a fall that you have to learn. It's part of the hero's journey. And I could get all Joseph Campbell on this if I really like, give me a platform, but it would be like 2 hours long and I'd have to have a PowerPoint, because that's the English major in me to do that. But I love that we're subtly getting that, and we're getting the seeds of it very, very early. And I think that's what makes this story so compelling. But what I loved about the scene where he's got the helm, and instead of like, no one touchy, I'm going to go take this myself kind of thing, and I didn't really pick up on this until like my third watch, because I watched first as a critic, second as a fan, third as a writer. And that's just always been my process for something, because at the end of the day, I'm a writer and I want to understand the wheels. I want to see the gears and how they work, because I always want to understand from a storytelling perspective. And what I took away from my third watch was he is issuing a challenge to Hades. He is giving Hades almost a quest of his own, if you want to think about it, by holding him accountable in a way the gods are never held accountable. And that didn't strike me until the third watch. This isn't him being, I mean, he's being confident about it for certain, but he is doing something that probably no mortal has done in a very long time. He's holding him accountable. You're going to do what you said you're going to do, because I did what I said I was going to do. And that right there, that's a big deal. That's more than just confidence. That says, that's everything about Percy Jackson. The themes, everything in one big moment. And retrospectively, that might be the biggest moment in the episode. And it was very subtle. And I think a lot of us didn't catch it on the first watch.
It's like very similar to kind of how he handles the Ares situation too, with it being like, this is my way. And then it's, what's awesome about that is we get it in the very next confrontation with when we meet Zeus, when we see Poseidon, and Poseidon says he's that kind of hero. He's going to do it his way. He's gonna set the rules. He's going to play by his own rules, and he's going to set them, and he's going to inspire the people just like your Thalia did. And it's exactly. And it's so similar to what Luke kind of taught him with like there are rules, and you have to, as long as you know how to use them against them. It's what he did with Ares, and it's what he did with Hades in a very different way as well. The Zeus scene to me was the one I found the most powerful of the episode, just because the late Lance Reddick was so stupidly incredible, like just perfect.
We'll never recover.
Could not have been more perfect. Adam, what did you think of that scene? Kind of pick any part that you want, whether it be his performance or etc., because there's so much here. There's so much. We could take a moment to be like, ooh, Olympus looked weird in the volume, but there was just so many better parts that are more important.
Yeah, if I have a chance to talk about Zeus and Olympus, I'm not going to waste it talking about the volume. That I'll talk about the volume on other things. I'm not going to talk about the volume on this. But my favorite part, the first thing I want to talk about is my favorite part. There's a few things that I want to hit here. Was, so much of what Zeus is as a character parallels Odin. Like, I don't, comparing mythologies. I'm not an expert of
Mhm.
any kind of mythology by any means, but Zeus and Odin have very similar complexities in which like they're
Yes.
the kings of their respective pantheons, and their power. They have this really, really strong ego and power complex that kind of goes
Mhm.
to their head in this never-ending search for knowledge that they're always willing to accept from other people, but will never give anybody else credit. Like nobody else will ever get any credit for it except themselves. And there's a really, really small moment in their interaction where Percy's first telling him about everything that's going on, and you can see in his face, this is all news to him. But then when he
Mhm.
turns it around on Percy, he's like, I knew all this. And he
Yep.
immediately turns everything right back around. And he portrays that just like the ego and everything so well. I really, oh my gosh, the world is just such a better place for having Lance Reddick in it. I mean, every
Yeah.
time we ever watched him in anything, he was incredible. And for this to be what I think will be one of his final performances is like really a great thing to stand on, because for everything that I know about Zeus, I'm admittedly not an expert. I know more about Norse mythology than I do about Greek. I'm not an expert on either by any means. I think you could study for years and not be an expert because there's just so much to learn. But admittedly, what I do know about Zeus and Greek mythology, he just absolutely embodies everything perfectly to a T.
Mhm.
Lance Reddick was the highlight of this, even though he was only there for a few minutes. Their whole interaction was just like the highlight of the episode for me.
The part that really highlighted the hubris for me and was like the moment where it was done so perfectly is when Percy says, like, I thought you would listen. Like Kronos wants you and your brothers to weaken each other as you're fighting. And he's like, like, no, we're gonna fight this war because they can't weaken me. And I need to show them that. That's why I'm
Mhm.
doing it. I don't care about them weakening me for Kronos. Please, my brothers can't weaken me. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. Nicole, what were your thoughts?
I just love, first of all, I have to say that I think it's incredible the absolute gift that was Lance Reddick's performance. And I genuinely, it breaks my heart that he's not here to hear us talk about how fantastic that performance was. Um, if there is an afterlife, I hope this is all going up to him. And he's like, heck yeah. Because he deserves all these flowers. But what I thought was interesting is that I said on Riptide Radio that, Hades is very much that I wasn't fired, I quit kind of guy. Um, so is Zeus. They're both cluster B
Zeus is, you
personalities.
didn't quit, you're fired.
You're fired. Yeah, they're both cluster B personalities. They're both types of narcissists. And I said this on Riptide. Like I really much feel like Hades in his palace and Zeus and Olympus are mirrors of each other. They're just styled slightly differently. And you really see that in how he's like, I'm gonna fight this anyway. They can't weaken me. But he really is like, he knows he's gonna get cooked, and he's pretending that's not gonna happen. And I also think that line of, do you think they come here because they love you? No, it's because they're scared of you. And you can see it register, but also deny, like at the same time. And that is that's such a personality trait. And I think that is it's perfect for Zeus. It adds a layer of depth to this character, and it makes it very lived in. And I think it's very interesting that one of the things this series has done such a beautiful job of is humanizing these characters who play with humanity like we are action figures. And I think that is just such a cool moment. And the fact that we've got puny human being like, dude, like, come on.
Puny
It's just
God.
such a good balance. And I think it's just such an important scene. And that scene was just so cool. And the performance of Lance Reddick elevated it to such an extreme. But I do want to note one thing. I know we all hate on the volume. I do want to say, I think it was actually a fitting thing for Olympus because, and I've said this on Riptide, I think we were only getting what humans conceive of it, and it was meant to kind of look fakey like a painting in certain ways. I think it was meant to be slightly artificial because we can't handle the truth kind of thing. Like, I think that was deliberate, and I really liked that touch. This is the one time I'm not going to hate on the volume because I think it worked perfectly here.
One of the things, and I think a big reason for this is when it was being written in the mid 2000s, this was even more relevant for kind of when our generation were smaller children, because it's changed a lot more recently. This mindset is a lot more toned down than it was even 20 years ago, and each generation less than the one before. And that's with parenting, looking at the Greek gods like just the parents of real life, and the half-bloods as the humans of the kids of real life. That was such a common parenting style for so many generations of, I'm right, you have to listen to me no matter what, without questioning it. I don't have to tell you why I'm doing the things I'm doing.
The gods
I'm
are
right.
boomers.
You have to listen. Exactly. The gods are the boomers.
The gods are boomers. The gods are my dad. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All of our
Sorry,
dads.
Dad,
They
I
are.
love you.
Exactly. And they're all of our dads. And that's the thing, right? Is it's no, you can't criticize me because I'm above it. Because I said so. And I don't need to be friends with you as long as you're scared of me and you will listen to what I say. And
I'm doing this for your own good.
Exactly. And I think it parallels that parenting technique so much. And Percy calls it out so perfectly with said, they don't love you, they're scared of you. Yep. And I think that's what a lot of our generation told a lot of parents, and we're kind of doing that, want to do it a little bit differently here. And so probably a big reason for that is because we all go to therapy more than in the generations before us.
Bruce is lucky he's not end up in a home. I mean,
like, you put Kronos in a home already, Zeus. You don't think that your kids are going to be doing that to you?
Do you not think we can do that to you, buddy? Because we can.
Exactly. And
I mean, maybe not Hermes because he has a casino and that looks like fun, but
you got Hades on one end of the spectrum, you got Zeus on the other end of the spectrum that are both alike because of of their extremes, and then you got Poseidon, the kind of wild card in the middle. Wild like the sea, can flow all over the place. And Adam, you've talked a lot throughout this season about how when the gods come in, these actors with limited screen time just give unbelievable performances that are so crucial to the season. And wow, did we see that again when Poseidon flies in to save Percy's life?
Oh, Toby Stevens, I believe is his name, right? If I'm not mistaken. When he first shows up, it's like that whole moment, like the because you can see Zeus getting progressively more pissed off because he knows Percy's right. And like kind of like you were saying earlier, Nicole, like everything he's saying, Percy's like Zeus is trying to put on a show, but it's all really getting to him. So when he finally explodes, even I was like, oh, like I was actually concerned. And then to see like when the camera pans, the direction in that scene was really, really great too. Just the way they kind of switch the camera angles and do all that. But when he finally shows up and then he pretty much just concedes to him like immediately, like the genuine fear and like worry in his face. Like the only thing that he cares about right now is protecting his son, which is like a foreign. Percy can't possibly understand that because for so long he's harbored these feelings for his entire life. He's harbored these feelings of like my father abandoned me. And like even now they've been kind of like compounded more recently that he knows like my father is because of my father is who he is are part of the reasons that I'm having these problems and he hasn't done anything to help me. And then like we get to see, oh my gosh, when he finally gets to ask him the question and he's like, do you ever dream about mom? That made me cry Tuesday night. And then that made me cry again today. And that was like, I think one of probably Walker Scobell's best delivery in the entire series. But that whole moment was so touching because like I was saying, Percy's been thinking about what he would get to say. That's probably always in the back of his mind. If I finally get to meet Dad, well, and instead of blowing up on him, like if he had met him a few days or a day after he found out that his father was Poseidon, this conversation looks very different. He's blowing up. Why did you abandon me and my mom and this and this? But it's like that maturity that he showed in that scene. Oh my gosh. And then the question and their interaction. Also, we got to shout out the speaking Greek because that was just really cool. That was such a nice touch that I was not expecting. And both Lance Reddick and Toby Stevens did such a great job that I was just getting chills on the like goosebumps listening to them speak Greek. That whole scene, everything from the time Percy steps up there to the time that he sends him back out into the field. It's like, oh my gosh, that was, I think, my favorite scene, like my favorite sequence in the entire series. That was absolutely perfect.
Couldn't agree more. And Nicole, I want to throw it to you specifically because you brought up so many great points on that question on Riptide Radio. And the one thing I want to throw in for it as well is I think that conversation, those questions were made more important, and they retroactively made at the end of episode 7 so much more important with that conversation between Sally and Poseidon.
Yeah.
Because how I kind of read that right off the bat, when he so quickly conceded, you know, when it was all to save Percy, because he sees and realizes when talking to Sally all the hardships, all the sacrifices, how she is willing to do whatever she can to protect Percy and to protect his causes, his life, to make sure that his godly life goes unbothered and he can do the same things he wants to be doing right now. And he's aware of that. He feels that pain. He gets it. He's not taking it for granted. He's grateful. And the second he sees that would have all fallen apart, it's done. I concede. It's over for me. And it was so incredible.
I challenge you to take it from this perspective too, because going back to the previous episode, we see Sally sacrificing so much, just so much with the life that she's got for Percy, to make sure Percy has a good life, to make sure that their son is raised the best way possible so that Poseidon can do whatever it is he needs to do, because this relationship, there are rules to the world that they live in. I also see him saving Percy because he is sacrificing this victory. It's not just about saving Percy. He's doing it for Sally.
Yeah.
Just like she's sacrificing for him, he's doing it for her. They very much still have a relationship. It's when two people love each other and cannot be together that love doesn't necessarily leave. It just changes form. And I think this is an example of it changed form, and that form is Percy. And here are two people who, this is the first time Poseidon has had the opportunity to basically declare his love for Sally in a way that isn't, sweeping Greek god romance is human kind of way. This is his way of saying to Sally, without seeing her, touching her, or breaking the rules, I care. I haven't given up. I am protecting our son. I sacrifice something to keep him safe because I know what that means. I know how important this is. And also, this is my son. And I think that's why the question of, do you dream about mom, is like a knife directly to his heart. Because he does. And he dreams about more than just his mom. It's so much bigger than that. And it's one of those things where it's like, sometimes broken relationships aren't toxic. It's just the world is toxic and there's no getting around it. And I think this is the case. And I feel like there are plenty of people, my partner included, who is like, dude, Poseidon's a crappy dad. I'm like, no, he's actually a really good dad. Just that sometimes life sucks. And these are two parents doing the best they can in the worst circumstance possible. And they are doing a fantastic job. I mean, look at what they've done. And I'm just again, I still say I always forget her name, but the Sally Jackson actress, give her all the awards.
Virginia Call.
Thank you. I always want to call her last name something else. I don't know why, but she's amazing. Give Toby all the awards too, because that is it's just so good. I'm never gonna get over the depth of the performance, and there's so much psychology to burrow into there. But that's parenting goals. I look at that and I'm just like, I need to step up my parenting game just a little.
I would agree with you that it's really good parenting too, because I'm looking at it from the lens of so often with you'll get a parent complex of, it's like, well, I want to be helpful. I just I want to help you in whatever way I can. And that often
I want to fix everything.
And it comes down to that it's not actually important subconsciously. This isn't a conscious thought, but it's not actually important for them to help solve your problems. It's important for them to quench their need to be helpful. That's what it is. It's I need to be helpful, and so doing this makes me feel like I'm helpful, and so it's good. Whether or not it actually makes your life easier or not. And Poseidon could be doing that at any moment.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think when he saved, like, so he wants to win a war. I haven't read the later books, and so if this is very much addressed, and I'm right or wrong, feel free to just smile and nod, But the way I'm kind of looking at Poseidon's perspective here is, I want to win. I don't necessarily know the goals of behind these war. Why are they even fighting in the first place? Aside from being Greek gods. And so I'm very much looking at it through the lens of Poseidon wants to live in a different world. He wants to be able to share his love with Percy. He wants to be able to share his love with Sally. And Zeus, being the tyrant that he is, isn't allowing that. So he wants to run a more like a different type of Olympus. And so that's why he wants to be in charge. And at that moment, while he will lose that ability if he loses this war, what he sees in Percy, and by prioritizing Percy and the world over his own need, which is, I love Percy, I just want to spend my time with him, I want to win my war. It's Percy, he's that kind of hero. Yeah. He embodies what he wants to see in the world. And so not getting his way isn't as important as preserving Percy, because Percy is the embodiment of the world being a better place. And so from that aspect, I do think it's some pretty incredible parenting, and even better acting by everyone involved. And that seemed like it could have been the end too. And then all of a sudden, bam, we're back at Camp Half-Blood.
We're back at Camp Half-Blood. We're back at camp.
We got the shirt on. We're back at camp. Adam, how did you feel about returning to camp? I love the Camp Half-Blood aspect, so I thought it was really awesome. And then again, throughout the theme of the episode, they waste no time. We're right into the Luke stuff.
Oh, being back at Camp Half-Blood, was great. And we talked about this last week. That was one of my favorite parts. That's why I enjoyed, I think, the first and second episodes more, most of the second episode, but more than I think some of the middle ones, because I just loved spending time at Camp Half-Blood. So it was so good to go back and revisit some of that. But what was so fascinating is it's like a common trope, right? That we see this hero kind of coming back to this warm welcome, which is something that it's like a really persistent theme with Percy in this episode too, something that he was longing for in the beginning of the season. Like if episode 2, Percy walks into Camp Half-Blood for this, he's eating it up. But now it's so much more like, man, I'm a part of something bigger than myself. I've got bigger responsibilities than like people cheering me on and doing all this kind of stuff. And not like, he's not going to turn his back away from it, but the embrace with Annabeth was really like the most important thing. But then, getting to see Clarice and all that kind of stuff was great. But oh my gosh, it was kind of a surprise to just go back and kind of end out the season like that. But it was great because like I said, episode 2, I think it's tough for anything to beat the finale. I think I've got to put the finale on top, but I think episode 2 is probably my favorite one. Camp Half-Blood is just great, but Chiron is also great. It was so great to get to see him back a little bit again, but Camp Half-Blood was perfect, man. It was so great to be back.
We did a little with a few of the Agents of Fandom team members. We did some bonding over the last weekend, and we rewatched the Lightning Thief movie with Logan Lerman and Alexandra Daddario, just for fun, basically. And to kind of admittedly pick it apart and laugh at it a little bit. One of the parts I admit, like watching this, because we hadn't seen Chiron in a long time in the show, my brain was full on expecting Pierce Brosnan to walk out as Chiron, and I was like, oh right, yeah, no, that was the movie.
That would have been wild.
That was not a real thing. That was from the movie. But the more we break it down, the more I appreciate this episode, because even in that little scene, it's exactly like you said, Adam. Earlier on, Percy would be eating that up, and now it didn't matter to him, because it's the mission is what's important. It very much reminded me of a Spider-Man moment of, Spider-Man, Peter Parker always longs to be accepted, to be appreciated, to be loved.
It's the end of Homecoming when Tony offers him the suit and he's like, no, I'm good. Like I want to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. That was what I kept thinking about in that scene.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many of them in the comics. There's even kind of a bit in, the Spider-Man movie where with Tobey Maguire, where everybody is cheering him on, and then the Green Goblin comes and pops all the things, because it's like, no, there's more important shit to do, Peter. I thought that was so incredible. But also, even as this is happening, in sync, as they're walking by, they're showing this aspect of Percy's growth, and they're also just doing a great job of foreshadowing main characters of season 2. You know,
Mhm.
we get our Clarice shots. We're speaking of the movie. We're not eliminating Clarice from the first season / movie entirely and making Annabeth merge her character and then still putting Clarice in the second movie as a main character. We know that makes no sense. And we're still, even though she's not a big part of the story, she's still being introduced and she's still being set up heavily to be a big part of the second one. What did you think about the return to Camp Half-Blood, Nicole?
I think what's interesting is, like you said, episode 2, Percy would have loved this moment, but finale, Percy, for this minute, it's a Pyrrhic victory. But he knows now that we've lost in a sense, because we now know what the real issue is. It's someone's out there working with Kronos. It's bad. So he can't really enjoy the moment. Like the fight's not won. And also, is mom back yet? And I like that, because a lot of times when people in finales, we get the yay, it's kind of the parade kind of moment. And I like that we get that, but we also get the gravity of it. And I love that it isn't a perfectly happy moment, because it does kind of keep us on the back foot a little bit, because we know we're going into. And I love how the show does that. It never quite fully satisfies us, because it's leading us somewhere. And I think it's a perfect setup. And like you said, it is giving us the trail to season 2 the whole time, while still giving us a complete story, just in case, heaven forbid, and Disney, you better not make this a one and done. I will come for you, mouse. But in the off chance the world ends tomorrow and this is all we get, and we're ghosts sitting in whatever is next, at least we got this, and it was a complete story. But I like that they did this, and I think it was a perfect structuring, and that was my cat's tail. Oates, you are not the center of attention right now, ma'am. Just putting that out there.
Oates is always the center of attention. You know how
she just wants everyone to know that she thinks there needs to be cats in Percy Jackson. Come on. But yeah, I think that scene was very necessary to both bring us back to center, but keep us just off center. And I like that a lot. I love how the show does that. It's very theatrical in that sense.
It's a theme with our Percy Jackson content that last week Liam was giving such a beautiful breakdown, and then my cat came by and just put his butthole right in front of my camera, and it was just Liam was giving this intense point, and then my cat's butthole was just front and center to the camera.
The cat is you cannot cook.
Yeah, exactly. This end, the end of the episode to me was so great. The fight was I do agree with a little bit with what no, actually, never mind. I'm going to retract my point before I even got it half back. I do think this end part of the episode, although maybe not comparing to the Zeus one for me, was still so great, because I do love a reveal where, it's almost that moment in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness where Wanda says, "Why don't you bring America over here?" And realizes I didn't tell you her name, and you didn't tell me her name, and it all gets broken loose, and the score changes. And when we get that, man, Percy figures it out, Luke, it wasn't, you couldn't talk about Clarice because it was you. And he figures it out, and the score changes, and they start fighting. And Liam brings up such a great point about later on in their fight too, how the tone just changes as soon as he brings up Hermes, and Luke's mindset changes. But that to me was the coolest part about this, is we really get Luke's full perspective. And going back watching the scene, that's what made me, after the first time, that's what made me look at the whole episode and the whole season differently, because it's Luke not just trying to set up Percy, not just trying to win, but it's him to recruit him, join my team, I have a side that I want to win. And what it really also portrayed so well was his love for Annabeth and Grover, and how the shared history that that group has, even though we haven't seen it, we could feel it. Later on when Annabeth shows up and you see the shock of oh fuck, it's basically my partner just walked in on me cheating on them. That was the look that he was giving when Annabeth was there, because they were best friends. And then Grover was his protector. Grover was his protector back in the day. And so the fact that like when he looks at Percy with those tears in his eyes and says, I didn't know you were going to give the shoes to Grover. Man, that was powerful and incredible. What did you
Yeah.
think about the Luke reveal, Adam?
So there's two things that I thought were particularly interesting about this entire sequence, which was like the fight is one of them. They're almost like two separate scenes within a scene, like the fight and the conversation. And I love what you mentioned earlier too, Nicole, about like Percy doesn't fight to kill. And in this scene, like Luke can't fight to kill either. So when they're actually fighting, like they're both angry. Percy's angry that he's just been betrayed, and Luke's angry that he brought up his father. But like neither one of them, like Percy's not going to try to kill him, and then Luke can't kill him because he needs his help. So like they're both kind of fighting on the like angry, but also on the defensive, like fighting to prove a point, to kind of prove themselves superior. And neither one of them really reaches that point. And then we get into this conversation that is so great because we all love a villain who, or any kind of like, anti-hero, I agree is a much better term for Luke, who's relatable. And when he's talking about the gods like this, you're like, Percy has so much like youthful naivete, and that he just doesn't understand really how the gods operate yet because he doesn't have that experience. But I mean, he's got a little bit of it from the season. But everything that Luke is saying is right. Now, Kronos is not, they joining the war and on their side. That's not the right path to carry this out. Percy has to figure out his own path. But it's not always as simple as just being black and white. It's not like, yes, the gods are doing their, but like it's so when Percy says our parents are trying their best, like that youthfulness in him really sees because like, yes, Percy's father is trying to, and I'm with you guys, like you were talking about Poseidon earlier. I think he's done so much more, especially we've seen the other gods just be completely shitty parents in so many different situations that for as little as like the rules permit them to help, Poseidon has done probably more than he was even permitted to. I think over the course of the season, he's been a great father. But like, so that's kind of all Percy really has to judge on this, not realizing as much like the other guy, like your dad may be like, okay, like your dad is good. And in your eyes, he's good. He's done some things to help you. But like, that is not how all the gods carry themselves. And that's one thing that like in all the stories that pertain to Greek mythology, the gods are crooked and they only care about themselves and they'll step on anybody to get what they want. And they betray each other all the time. It's a constant battle. And Luke is older than him. He has that experience. He knows this, but Kronos is still joining their side is still not the right way to go about this. And I'm really excited to see Percy kind of learn his own way because it's definitely not going to be with the gods, but it's also not going to be with Kronos as well. That whole scene was so interesting between the two of them, the fight and then also the conversation that followed.
What I think is interesting about that, especially when you look at between Percy and Luke, especially now, the difference between the two, especially when I talked to your dad and you see that explosive reaction. The difference between Luke and Percy is Percy has hurt. He's been hurt. He has hurt feelings. Luke has actual trauma. And if you've read further into the series, you know what that trauma is. You know why he is susceptible to Kronos's idea, why Kronos's plan, or why he sounds like a better option. It's that, again, heart is in the right place because he justifiably is done with this crap, but why he's so susceptible. It's kind of the same idea of why a cult leader is able to get some people versus other, because we've all got bad things that have happened to us. Why does this obvious cult leader snare some of us but not others? It comes down to trauma. And Luke has trauma that Percy does not. And that's really what it comes down to. And so for Luke and what he has endured and what he has seen, the gods aren't doing their best because of what has happened in his life. Be it that maybe he doesn't know the full balance of it, and maybe there's extenuating circumstances or a side of the story he doesn't know. But from his experience, he's had real damage done. And so for him, his logic makes sense, and that makes it understandable and relatable. And you're right, they're not trying to kill each other. They're not even trying to hurt each other. I don't think Luke ever wanted to hurt anyone other than the people who have genuinely hurt him. And they're not people, they're gods. And he don't think, to a certain extent, he doesn't really want to hurt them. He wants a power change. He wants the game to stop being unfair. And so he has been sold on this idea of a golden age, not realizing that if that happens, it's going to be a hell of a lot worse. And you feel for him.
And that was incredibly well put. And it's just, there's more, I was gonna say, for more like lore background, and make sure you're checking out Riptide Radio and the breakdown, because they're talking about Backbiter and some of those other things in there as well. And we've already been here for over an hour, and so I might as well just plug then another great Percy Jackson show as well, as opposed to us fully getting into that as well. But I think the trauma aspect of that was really, really well said. And I want to make sure before we get out of here at the end, because specifically on that topic, Nicole, it's one of the reasons I find you such an incredible writer. Is my background, it's not journalism, it's teaching and psychology. Those are where my degrees are. And you've written some just phenomenal articles about trauma and the psychological aspects of different characters throughout various universes, whether it be Marvel, Star Wars, Percy Jackson. And so I want to make sure I'm putting this on the record so we don't forget about it. We'll give you a chance to plug those specific types of articles as well at the end of the show. What do we think about the depiction of Kronos, of him being very much like a shrouded, hooded figure? I'm almost getting like Gore the God Butcher vibes from him, as opposed to, the polar opposite of what we see in the Sea of Monsters movie, where he's just this big Surtur looking being of like a big fireman. And then we get like a very kind of eerie end to this season, with it being like half in dreams. You don't really know what's real and as it's coming. So what did you think of the Kronos teases at the end, Adam, and the reuniting with Sally Jackson?
Sorry, your mic was cutting a little bit in and out for me. You're gonna have to repeat the question, because I didn't quite get you right there.
Apologies. What do you think of the Kronos, of like how he looks in the tease for season 2? And then we're finally back reunited with Mom. What did you think of Percy and Sally being reunited?
So for the Kronos thing, I thought he looks great. The only thing it's throwing my brain off a little bit. This is not in any way a nitpick, but obviously most of my, especially Greek mythology, comes from God of War, where the Titans in God of War are literally huge, like hundreds and hundreds of feet tall. So it was just kind of different for me to get to see that. But overall, I think he looks great. That's not one of those things where I'm like, oh, they all need to be designed this way, because I think everybody designing these things and involved with the production has their own vision for it. And I thought he looked really great. And even though he wasn't, the size of the Empire State Building, I thought he was really menacing. You got to excuse me, I'm not sure who exactly was voicing him, but I thought he did a great job. And then to see, well, now we're to the second part of the episode that really just made me cry tears, very, very passionate tears both times, because to see Percy reunited with his mother was so, because although we've seen it kind of throughout the season, it's been weird, because this is the first time that he's actually seen his mother since he watched her get squished by the Minotaur. And like, we've seen it in these flashbacks, but as I was watching, I found myself thinking like, this is what we've been getting, this kind of these little scenes to tide us over, but Percy hasn't been getting those. He's been missing his mother the whole time. So he, as much as we were wanting to see them reunited, he wanted it even more. And I could really, when they hugged, oh my gosh. And then it did throw me off a little bit when it kind of went in and out of the dream. I'm still a little bit kind of confused as to how all that works. And when I rewatched today, I tried to pick up on it. I'm like the transition of where he comes out of the dream, he goes right into the dream onto the beach. And then that was all a little bit confusing to me, but it didn't take away from the moment of how touching it was.
Time passed somewhere in there. Some time passed.
Time travel. Yeah. No, it was incredibly touching to get to see them together. That's one of those things where even if I'm like, part of me is wondering like, wait, how did this happen? I'm too overwhelmed with emotion to even be bothered by it.
One thing I want to say before I forget, because I did forget as we move past the Luke stuff, but Charlie Bushnell just did an incredible job acting wise in those scenes. Portraying the love he had for Grover, the love he had for Luke, and how he didn't want to set anybody up, and he wasn't trying to hurt them. He was just trying to accomplish his plan. He showed that in his voice, in his facial expressions. It was incredible. Also specifically with his voice, but I got some big Anakin Skywalker vibes from Luke, Charlie Bushnell in that scene. And it did make me think like, if we ever need a younger Anakin, I think Charlie Bushnell could do a good job, both with the voice, with his sword fighting skills, with the angsty acting. I could see it. But the other thing, going back to Sally with Virginia Cull, we talked so much about how in our previous episodes about how incredible she's been, give her all the awards. Nicole, you brought it up here as well, and I just watched the documentary today, and she was talking about, I can't remember if it was a niece, a nephew, what specifically who she was talking to, but a younger person in her life, maybe, I don't think it was a son or daughter, but a younger person that she was close with in her life, was like asking her, like, how are things going? What have you been up to? And she said, well, I just had like an audition for this thing. And they say like, ooh, what was the thing? And she said, Percy Jackson. And apparently the kid just like, they're walking like down, I think New York, a street down New York as it's happened. And the kid just like stops, is vibrating, tears everywhere. And that, she said, that was the first time I realized like how much this series means to so many people. And she took the assignment personally and she nailed it, because she has been the heart of the entire series, and it goes right through here to the end.
Yeah. And my whole thing is that scene at Montauk in the cabin, and then again at their apartment in New York. For me, it just summed up into one thing. This is the first time Percy's truly seeing his mom, because now he knows. He knows who he is. He knows who she is. And he knows everything she's been through, that they have been through together to get to this moment. And it is just so perfect. He has this wonderful moment that most people never get until either it's too late or extraordinary circumstances, or they're much, much older to really see their parents for who they are. And he's seeing his mom for the first time. And it's beautiful. And I just, especially when it's like, yeah, he really said to tell your mom you love him. And it's just that perfect moment. He's looking at her and she's looking at him. And for the very first time, they're genuinely seeing one another completely. And it's like, I'm done. You killed me. I'm finished.
Oh, just don't pass this back to us, Nicole. You're saying these beautiful things, and then you're gonna make us come back in and just like.
All right, so to keep it from credit, let's now get to that post-credit scene so we can all laugh.
Yes, great point, because Smelly Gabe gets turned to stone. I wasn't expecting the post-credit scene. I was literally just chilling.
Made me so happy.
Like laying in bed, I was like checking my phone after the episode as the credits were rolling, and then all of a sudden that pops back up, and I was like, oh, what's going on? And we see Smelly Gabe getting turned into stone by Medusa's head. Adam, what did you think of the post-credit scene? And when's your best guess? When are we getting the season 2 announcement?
So as for the post-credit scene, it was funny because I didn't even notice it my first time around. I just kind of cut it when the credits rolled. But then I noticed today when I finished, I was like, wow, there's still like 5 minutes. Let me scroll through and make sure. And then I was like, oh, you got something. So it was a very nice surprise today. And then to get this, I mean, that was, I don't know why. We've talked about this throughout, I mean, for so as long as I've been on this podcast, that I am the worst at like picking up what's going to happen. So in my head, for whatever reason, I was like, oh man, he's going to open it and see the head and cause some kind of trouble for Percy. Like, I don't know why I didn't put together that he was getting ready to get turned to stone, but it was just a complete surprise to me because I thought he was going to like peek into the box and see it. And oh my gosh. So they went to see him look and then just started, I busted out laughing when I was watching this because it just came as such a surprise to me. But that was a nice touch. I love the post-credit scenes that don't necessarily set up anything really, really important, but just are a nice little gift for the fans. And that's kind of what that felt like. But oh man, for season 2, I feel like they kind of need to get their butts in gear about this. I'm really surprised we haven't gotten anything with it yet. This is not the kind of show where with the cast like the ages that they are, where they can play around and have 4 years between seasons. Otherwise, we're going to have the little boy that played young Percy playing Percy by like season 3. Because I just don't, I mean, Percy doesn't age that much from what I remember. And then obviously, like I said, I haven't read past, I believe, the 3rd book, but I know he's not 30 years old by the time, like wherever they're at in the series right now. So it's like Walker's already, even like watching the press interviews and stuff compared to watching the series, all of them already seem much more mature and much older.
Puberty's happening right now for that kid. He grew 8 inches. The voice is cracking.
Yeah, he got taller.
Exactly. So So it's like I feel like they don't have the time that for whatever reason they think they have, because they need to get their butts in gear and get moving on this now. I was hoping like that we see so many times like we do on other Disney Plus shows that we get that tease at the end, like you were saying earlier, the season 2 tease, like Percy Jackson will return in season 2, like we got for Loki. But then obviously we didn't get anything like that. And then apologies because I can't give proper credit. I can't remember, but somebody was speaking with the directors recently. I saw a clip or something about it that said the writers were working on the second season. Is kind of where they're at with it right now. I can't remember exactly where I saw that or who it was with, so apologies for that. But if that's the case, like, give the writers like all the time they need to work on things. I by no means do I want to be rushing them, through their process and anything, but it's like, guys, these kids don't have but for so long for them to be kids, because even if they started filming right now, there's already going to be like, what does she say? Are you ready for 7th grade? When you're watching Walker Scobell now, that is not a 7th grader. That's already like a high school, pretty clearly like a high schooler. So even if they started filming now, it feels like they're a little behind, especially if they don't start for another year or two, which it seems like that's probably where, if I had to guess, that we maybe, if they like what they see, which I don't think they have any reason not to, given the numbers and everything that I've seen, maybe best case scenario, we start filming later they start filming. I'm not involved in the production. I don't know why I said we. They start filming later this
Maybe you will
year.
be.
Who knows? Yeah, that would certainly be a surprise to me, and I think everybody else. But yeah, later this year is like my optimistic guess, but realistically, I feel like it would not be until early sometime 2025 that they would start filming and like really moving forward with the next season. I hope that's not the case, but it would surprise, because think about The Last of Us. It just ended last year around this time, and they're just about to start filming. So I'm thinking about that same kind of schedule for them. So I know now they don't have to deal with the strikes like The Last of Us did, but maybe end of this year, early next year, hopefully.
I'm willing to, I have no inside information. This is just me guessing, but I'm going to go ahead and assume in my head that they already are. There are, whether it's writing, whether it's film, I don't necessarily know that they're filming, but I would bet pre-production is currently going on season 2, maybe even production now. It's been confirmed to people involved, and they're just told not to talk about it yet. And they're going to be announcing it at some big event in the future, or at some specific time. And I'm willing to bet that they're already pretty actively working on season 2. Nicole, what are your thoughts on that? And then also, just because we've been going on for a while now, feel free to plug your stuff. Where can the people find you? And of course, thank you so much as always for coming on, because we love having you.
I love being here. My thoughts on season 2 is I do think that I think the strikes have delayed everything to an extent. I think that realistically, we probably would have gotten information on this a little bit faster if it hadn't been for the strikes, which were absolutely necessary, and I'm not complaining. My gut feeling, and this is just my personal opinion, again, no inside information. I'm not that cool. I think that there's probably the people who need to know already know. And in terms of, and I bet, and like I believe that if we are actually getting one, I believe the wheels are already in motion. In terms of when we get the announcement, I think they're either going to make an announcement once they get like a full possible, like, because the finale just hit streaming this week. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to wait till they get a full Air Plus 7 type of numbers, so they can be like, look at the finale streaming numbers for a whole week type of thing, so they can pump how popular the show has been, or at an event or some reason or some time when they need to push something to get some like good press type of thing, because it's all about getting people excited. Because realistically, with the strikes, we're going to have gaps in programming. That's just the nature of the beast. So holding that information to kind of limp us along and keep us excited for stuff, holding an announcement would make sense, as annoying as it is. And I understand that. I can't imagine a world where we don't get a season 2. I really can't. Like, it would be a mistake to not give us a season 2.
Well, and the other thing I didn't even consider until right this second, it could be like, maybe they're not going to be announcing a return for season 2. We know this is, if they're completing the story, this is a multi-year process. Mm-hmm. If they're waiting to see the full numbers, like you mentioned, maybe the purpose of that full number pitch is so we can say, look at what we did. It's only going to get bigger.
Yep.
renew for season 2, 3, and 4 right now.
Yeah,
So
it
we
could
can
be a
plan
big
out
one.
this
Yeah.
whole process and
Yeah.
film all in unison and get it
And they
all out
might.
in ages.
And that's realistically possible. Like, contracts can work that way. Maybe they have to renegotiate an option to get additional seasons into contracts. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes legally. Like, there's a bunch of stuff with that. But I definitely feel like the chances are high. I will be stunned into silence if we don't get a season 2. It just feels like they would be dumb to not give us more. I mean, if they keep giving us all the Star Wars stuff, and Percy Jackson clearly has the kind of devotion, so why not give us more? As for where you can find me, you can find me haunting the site formerly known as Twitter at Life in Polaroid. And then I've got all kinds of stuff coming down the pike at ComicBook. I've got pieces coming up about deaf representation, how DC needs to catch up to Marvel, because I'm clearly passionate about that on a very big level. And I'm thinking about actually digging into the trauma aspect of things within Percy Jackson. It's something I've kind of been kicking around. I just need to figure out my approach with that. So just keep tabs on me over there to see what kind of crazy I cook up next, because the chef is in the kitchen most of the time. So
make sure you check out Nicole's stuff over at comicbook.com. Follow her on socials. And we also got a lot of crazy, great stuff coming over at the Agents of Fandom right now as well. In terms of interviews, we dropped not 1, but 2 podcast episodes this week. You can also find my interview with Carolina Ravassa, who voiced Queen Isabella in What If, up on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. She also voices Raze in Valorant and Sombra in Overwatch. And then, of course, you can still find my Echo interviews with Devery Jacobs and Katarina Ziervogel up on the website and wherever you get your podcasts. And then, Adam, I want to throw it to you too, because like we got articles cooking right now. Like we just posted out more in the last couple days than I've seen us posting in such a short time in a while. And a lot of that is because of what Ethan Simi's been up to.
Yeah, well, Ethan's been at Sundance, and I could not possibly list off the top of my head every single movie he's reviewed. I think it's been close to 15. And he's been having a great time, and I think he was doing the digital version, but I know he's gotten to see so many awesome movies. So those are all up on agentsofandom.com. We can't end this podcast without shouting out Brandon, who has just done such a phenomenal job with Percy Jackson recaps on a week-to-week basis. You know, he got early access to the first few episodes and was able to get all those done in a timely manner. And then since then, the man watches the episode as soon as it drops, stays up until midnight, 1 a.m, writing the recap. You know, then we got Garrett, who's up with it. I'm on the East Coast, so that's a little, and I wake up at around 5 a.m. every morning, so that's a little bit harder for me. But Garrett up on the West Coast and stays up with them, edits the articles, they get it out in a timely manner. The two of them have been doing such an awesome job. But yeah, I mean, what do I always say? We've always got like everything up there that anybody could possibly want. Just for me personally, I'll have next week, or I guess a week from tomorrow, I'll have reviews of Shogun and Apple TV's Constellation coming on February 9th. 2 shows that I am very, very excited to talk about, especially Shogun, which I can actually say, I just want to say one brief thing about Shogun is that it's samurai coded Game of Thrones for anybody that's interested in something like that. It's absolutely brilliant. Perfect. 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, whatever the scale is. But can't talk about Constellation yet. But yeah, everything else, like you said, Sundance, Percy Jackson, all that kind of stuff. We've got everything that anybody could want there. So make sure to check out agentsofandom.com.
Forgot I had a review drop today too. You can check out my review for
yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the new series
I
up on
also have a review for that dropped today.
What were your just brief thoughts on that one? I'm interested.
I really liked it. I thought it was a fresh way to kind of reinvent that story and make it a character study.
I do. The character study aspect was what I liked as well. I think I would have enjoyed it more if it was called something different. You know, if I just wasn't comparing it to Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, who ruined each other's lives to get married because they fell so deeply in love in that movie. But you can read more about that up on both mine and Nicole's review, agentsfandom.com, comicbook.com. Hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on socials at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. And for more Percy Jackson episodes with Seaweed Brain Podcast with Liam Crowley, you can find that up on the podcast feeds as well. We got some exciting episodes coming. A bit of a down period with content, so we're going to play some games. We're going to do some drafts. We're going to have on some guests that we have never had on before. And then the next big show that we're going to be covering is going to be Avatar: The Last Airbender on Netflix. And so stay tuned. We got a lot of great content coming. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in on behalf of the whole Agents of Fandom team. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us, and we will see you next week. Peace.